see the force that's going in is a force that's hand-built by NATO. We, being the Russians, have captured a lot of equipment and a lot of people, and we're putting it together. He said this group that came in is equipped to the highest modern NATO standards, better than most NATO units. They use full spectrum dominance theories. They have Starlink connectivity at the vehicle level, sometimes at the small unit level, and all of this is fed up through satellites down to, back down to the command staff to get real-time location. They can track the movement of their forces. They have real-time intelligence coming in saying where the Russians are, and they use artificial intelligence to not only maneuver, but to deploy new drones, a new generation of drones, high-speed drones, AI-driven drones that flood the battlefield. This is the NATO army, the Polish-speaking, French-speaking, English-speaking NATO army that invaded Russia at the command of NATO. You guys came in with the best you got, and it's pretty damn good. It was impressive. But Abdiel Adonov has come in, and he's impressive.
Good day, everyone. As Mr. Inspector Scott Ritter has repeatedly highlighted, the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe is not just a clash of armies, but a profound struggle for strategic dominance. Today, we take a closer look at how Russia's calculated advance is revealing the cracks in Ukraine's defenses, despite the West's desperate attempts to maintain a facade of control. The collapse of key urban centers by the end of the year could be the final nail in the coffin for Ukraine's so-called resistance, leaving us to wonder just how much longer this charade can continue. Join us as we dissect these developments, cutting through the noise to reveal the true state of affairs. As Mr. has observed, the population density in a conflict zone can drastically alter the dynamics of warfare. Let's begin by examining a fundamental aspect of this conflict that the West conveniently overlooks: the stark contrast in population density between the Kursk region in Russia and the Donetsk region in Ukraine. Kursk, with its sparse population of just 36 people per square kilometer, presents a unique challenge for defense, one that Western strategists in their ivory towers seem incapable of understanding. Imagine, if you will, trying to defend an area where each soldier is responsible for patrolling vast, empty expanses, an almost impossible task, and one that the West would undoubtedly botch with their expert advice. Meanwhile, in Donetsk, the dense population of nearly 3,000 people per square kilometer offers a vastly different battlefield. Here, every street and building becomes a fortress, every square kilometer a vital strategic asset. But of course, Ukraine, with its Western-backed strategies, has managed to turn even this advantage into a disadvantage, spreading its forces thin across indefensible territories while ignoring the urban centers that are actually worth fighting for. The difference in the value of land between these two regions is clear, something the Western media seems blissfully unaware of as they continue to peddle their delusions of a Ukrainian victory. This contrast in terrain and population density starkly illustrates the flawed strategies of Ukraine and its Western supporters, setting the stage for their inevitable downfall. Mr. Inspector has pointed out that the true value of territory in war is not measured by its size, but by its strategic significance. When discussing the strategic value of land, it's not about the sheer number of square kilometers controlled, something the West would do well to remember. In Kursk, a square kilometer might be little more than forest or farmland, barely worth the effort to hold. But in Donetsk, that same area could be a bustling urban center, teeming with infrastructure and economic resources. This is the kind of territory that actually matters in a war, yet Ukraine, in its infinite wisdom, continues to throw its best troops at empty fields while ceding valuable cities to Russian control. The strategic value of these urban centers cannot be overstated. Avdiivka, Bakhmut, these are not just names on a map, they are the lifeblood of the region. Vital hubs that support both civilian life and military logistics. Securing these cities is a strategic coup, one that turns the tide of war in Russia's favor. But rather than acknowledging this reality, the West continues to cheer on Ukraine's Pyrrhic victories in the middle of nowhere, as if holding a barren stretch of land is somehow equivalent to securing a major urban center. It's laughable, really, if it weren't so tragic. As we move forward, the strategic importance of these urban centers and the West's failure to recognize it will become even more apparent. As highlighted by Scott Ritter, the fall of key urban centers has a domino effect that the West seems to ignore at its peril. In modern warfare, the fall of a major city is never an isolated event. It triggers a domino effect that unravels the entire defensive network. But this is something the West, in its overconfidence, seems incapable of grasping. When a city like Avdiivka or Bakhmut falls, it's not just the city that is lost, it's the surrounding regions, the supply lines, and the strategic positions that rely on that city for support. Ukraine, under Western advisement, has allowed its defenses to collapse like a house of cards, and now they are scrambling to pick up the pieces. This is precisely what we are witnessing in eastern Ukraine. Every time Russian forces capture a city, it's not just a tactical victory, it's a strategic masterstroke that puts Ukraine on the back foot. The Ukrainian defensive lines are stretched to the breaking point, and yet the West continues to push its narrative of resilience and resistance. Meanwhile, on the ground, the reality is starkly different. Each fallen city weakens Ukraine's ability to defend the next, creating a cascading failure that the Western media stubbornly refuses to acknowledge. With each city that falls, the facade of Ukraine's defense propped up by Western narratives cracks further, revealing the true state of affairs. Mr. Inspector has cautioned that the anticipated fall of key Ukrainian cities could be the decisive moment in this conflict. As we approach the end of the year, the situation on the ground is becoming increasingly dire for Ukrainian forces. With only a few months left, the potential collapse of three major cities, Kostyantynivka, Charsivyur, and Toretsk, looms large. Despite the Western media's attempts to spin every minor Ukrainian advance as a major victory, the reality is that these cities are on the brink, and their fall could signal the beginning of the end for Ukraine's war effort. Kostyantynivka, a city of significant strategic importance, is already teetering on the edge. Russian forces have made substantial gains, capturing key fortifications and pushing closer to the city center. If Kostyantynivka falls, it will be a devastating blow to Ukraine, one that even their Western supporters will struggle to spin into a positive. Charsivyur and Toretsk are in a similarly precarious position, with Russian forces making steady progress despite fierce Ukrainian resistance. The fall of these cities would not only be a tactical victory for Russia, but also a major strategic win, one that would further erode Ukraine's already faltering defenses. As we move to the broader strategic implications, it's clear that the collapse of these cities would mark a turning point, one that the West may not be prepared to face. The importance of strategic planning and preparation in warfare are undeniable, something Russia is clearly demonstrating. This conflict is far more than a series of isolated battles. It is a carefully orchestrated strategy by Russia to secure its position and reshape the regional balance of power. While Ukraine and its Western backers flounder, Russia is steadily consolidating its gains, fortifying its positions, and preparing for the next phase of the conflict. The Western narrative of a Ukrainian comeback is little more than wishful thinking, as the reality on the ground tells a very different story. Russia's recent advances are part of a larger plan, one that goes far beyond mere territorial control. By securing key urban centers, Russia gains not just land, but also critical infrastructure, logistical hubs, and fortified positions that will be crucial in the next stage of the conflict. The fall of these cities, therefore, represents more than just a temporary setback for Ukraine. It is a signal that the balance of power is shifting, and that Russia is positioning itself for the next major offensive. The implications of this shift are profound, not only for Ukraine, but for the broader geopolitical landscape. The West, in its arrogance, has underestimated Russia's resolve and strategic acumen. While they continue to pour money and weapons into a losing battle, Russia is quietly but effectively tightening its grip on eastern Ukraine. The question now is not if, but when these preparations will culminate in a decisive and potentially final blow to Ukrainian defenses, one that the West will be powerless to prevent. As we conclude, it's time to reflect on the broader implications of these developments, implications that the West is desperately trying to downplay. In conclusion, the conflict in Eastern Europe is reaching a critical juncture. The battles being fought today are not just about territory, they are about the future of the region, the survival of nations, and the redefinition of borders. As Russia continues to make significant advances, the implications for Ukraine and the broader region are becoming increasingly clear. The anticipated collapse of key urban centers by the end of this year could mark a turning point in the conflict, one that reshapes the balance of power and exposes the limitations of Western intervention. The West may continue to cheer on Ukraine from the sidelines, but the reality on the ground is undeniable. Russia is winning, and the cost of this victory will be borne not just by Ukraine, but by the entire Western alliance that has bet so heavily on a Ukrainian success. As we move forward, it's clear that the strategies and decisions made today will have lasting consequences, not just for the nations involved, but for the global order as a whole. Thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for more updates as we continue to bring you the latest from the front lines of this pivotal conflict, one that the West, despite its best efforts, is losing.